And now, live from Jerusalem, you're listening to Israel-Inspired Radio. Here are your hosts, Rabbis Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Israel Inspired on the Land of Israel Network, thelandofisrael.com. Ari Abramowitz here with my best friend, my Rebbe, Rabbi Jeremy Gimpel. How are you, Jeremy?
How are you doing?
Thank God I'm doing well. I'm doing well. This is a big week. It's a big Shabbat for you. You got a big event coming up.
Big time. Big time. It's my son Akiva's bar mitzvah. He was born in 2007, 40 years after the Six-Day War. His name is Akiva because that was the turning point for Akiva in his life. It's also the parshas of Jacob and Esav, and Akiva is really just another name for Jacob. And my grandfather's father, his name was Akiva, and he was the last religious person we had in our family line. And now Akiva, born in the land of Israel, back as a religious Jew in the mountains of Judea. It's like a full circle on the 40th year. So it's really a big deal for me personally. He's just an awesome kid. It's really exciting.
It's not only a big deal for you personally, for me personally, and really for all the Jewish people. Yeah. He's a very special kid. Last night I was sitting there writing. I was supposed to be preparing for the show, but I was actually writing my speech, my brachot that I wanted to give to him, because your children really, for all these years, I have not had children. You've been having child after child after child, and you've shared them with me, and they've really been like a nachama. Nachama?
Yeah. Consolation?
A consolation for me. Yeah, like they've brought me tremendous joy. They've been like my own children in a lot of ways.
They see that. They feel that for sure. Family. But yeah, this is now my second child that I'm bringing into the ranks of the Jewish people.
You're a father of two men. Two men. It's really exciting.
And I have some experience now of how to really make the bar mitzvah experience at least as transformational as you can with a 13-year-old. There's like a system that I've developed that I see it working. I see it happening. I'd love to share a little bit of the insights that I've had now in my second kid. And it's for anyone that really...
Yeah, I remember you were going to write a little book of a bar mitzvah guide.
Yeah, a bar mitzvah guide for the perplexed. Yeah. So I mean, why don't you write the book? I can just say it right now on the podcast. And then people that have children, whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew, in my mind, the concept of having a bar mitzvah, where there is a point in the child's life, 13 is a great age, they become a teenager, where they go through some sort of transformational process. They take on some responsibility. They become different. It's like a coming of age. There actually needs to be a ceremony, a something that's like the Jewish wisdom of, the bar mitzvah, reading from the Torah, the party, all of that around it is brilliant. And it should really be, it's a human exercise that would be a blessing to anyone that's raising kids to help them transition from being a kid to an adult.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things that Torah Judaism has to offer to the world is marking moments in time. I just picture people whose days go into weekends, into days, into weekends, and it's just one constant flow. There's no Shabbat that you're able to take a moment and reflect and mark a holy moment in time. And this is like a holy moment for you. And I'll tell you that it's been a very powerful, profound, holy time for me and my family, for Shayna and her family. Because as you know, Bubby Zush, she left the world. Her grandmother, a survivor of Auschwitz, left the world. And it's been, it makes you ask questions about life and death and what that's all about. In my family, we talk about death all the time. We struggle with our mortality. Abramowitz men tend to leave the world on the earlier side rather than the later. And I think by constantly thinking we're going to die, it allows you to really live to the most. And Bubby Zush really, she lived a very full life in a sort of a similar way to what you were saying about Tehilah's grandfather, right? That what he witnessed.
Yeah, that generation, which is now slowly but surely passing on. How old was Bubby Zush?
96.
96. So she lived through Auschwitz, saw the Holocaust, saw the rebirth of the state of Israel in the Independence Day War, witnessed the Six-Day War, saw grandchildren. Shayna, now, please God, February is due, Bez Sha'a Tova Mutzlachat, all of this was known to her. She
B'sha'a
saw.
tova. I'm just going to let that go because we haven't been really like making announcements. We haven't, but that's a way that
There it is. The cat is out of the bag.
The cat's out of the bag.
Now
This has
everyone
been-
can say B'sha'a tova. People can daven for an easy delivery, a blessed birthing. Wonderful.
Yes, and
Baruch Hashem.
the brachot and the prayers have really been a profound.
And
part
you
of
had a
this
special
experience.
time with her just a few months ago in this last summer.
I did. And I was thinking, why do we cry when someone leaves the world, right? Even if we have crystal clear knowledge that they're in a better place, they just shedded this garment that we call a body. Even if we know that, we still cry. And so I was thinking about Bubby Zush, and the answer for me is that we're mourning this distinctly unique soul. Everybody is a unique soul. But that was Bubby Zush, the beautiful and unique divine manifestation that she was in the world, right? Just this past week, there were a horrific accident. I don't know if it was an accident or not, where a mother and the baby left the world. Those are unique, holy, beautiful, unique. That's the key word here, is that there's no replica. There's no energy that will ever be like that in the world. And Bubby Zush had such a powerful one. She had the smile and her love and her blessings, and now they're just sort of memories, and that's grief. And even if we know that it's just this world is temporary, it feels very permanent, that loss.
Yeah, also, I've come to recognize that the most marvelous people that I've met are people that have been through struggles, that have been through hard times. It's as if the hard times have birthed within them a certain character, a certain perseverance, a certain reality that if you're just born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you're just like a spoiled whatever. It's like less interesting. Someone that's come from the depths and sorrows and struggles of life and then persevered and built a beautiful life and family and future. Those people are just more shining lights that they're more crystallized.
Yeah,
They've
that's
been
why
more polished. They're just real. In that generation, they lived through the exile, but the deep exile where there was no light at the end of the tunnel. There wasn't a state of Israel. It's like hard for us to imagine that all of that happened in one lifetime, that it went from the dry bones and burnt ashes that Ezekiel saw. And Ezekiel's like, what? Can this even live? God, he's so blown away, like saw what seemingly this pit from the Holocaust. And he's like, how could anything arise from that? And God says, sure enough, the Israel will be resurrected. And then just a few years later, after the ashes of Auschwitz, the state of Israel was resurrected. But those Jews, the first generation that lived through the exile, transitioning to this beginning of the redemption, they were so refined and so put through the grinder that they were just an entire generation of heroes, an entire generation of amazing people. And 92, that's quite a life.
Yeah, and it says in benching, Birkat HaMazon, that God blesses Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, bakol mikol kol, right? With everything, but it says bakol mikol kol. Now they say that bakol is Avram, mikol is Yitzchak, and akol is Yaakov. Now, why is that? I mean, just look at Yaakov's life, right? His son is sold into slavery. His wife dies in childbirth. His father-in-law tries to kill him. His brother's trying to kill him. Just constant sorrows. But when you look back at his life, the 12 tribes of Israel came from that. Those were good years, even though they were painful years. And if you have that consciousness, then you're able to emerge from those painful years and smile, a genuine smile. And Bubby Zush, she had the most glowing, you just have to see the pictures. I think maybe the picture for our show, I'll put it, one of the pictures of Bubby Zush. It was just her trademark smile that filled the world. Even though she lost the lion's share of her family in the Holocaust, she endured, she experienced among the darkest points in Jewish history, and she still had that smile, and she was still constantly full of blessings, even though she said she would constantly, like I said before, she would bless all the time, but she said she was at a war with God. A war with God, but her war with God, I really think, was holier in a lot of ways than other people's peace with God.
Sure.
Because go ahead.
Well, just that is this week's Torah portion. This is Akiva's Torah portion that, of course, as I walk through the house, I hear him reading the trup and the melody of practicing because he's about to stand up Shabbat and read the whole Torah portion. And it's like this week where Jacob receives his name as Israel. In the name, the transition of Jacob to Israel, where Jacob really becomes his true identity, his higher self. He matures to who he was destined to be, Israel. That name, God says, is to struggle with man and to struggle with God, meaning the essence, the purpose, our whole existence. We got to struggle because we're never going to achieve a full knowledge or understanding of God. All we can do is keep on levakesh. We can just keep on pursuing more and more truth, more and more understanding, but it will constantly be a struggle. But at the end, it's to struggle with man, to struggle with God, vatuchal, but ultimately to smile at the end, to persevere and to prevail. And that is Israel. That is who we are.
And I want to talk about what's come from this Bubby Zush thing. I'm not just talking about it for no reason. Something is actually unraveled in this whole story that I want to share. But that was, I think, what you just said is why her smile was more beautiful than anyone else's that I can ever remember seeing. Because it was not only despite the horrific things that she endured, but in some ways it was because of it that she was able to take from that a joy and a love and a blessing. And I'll tell you, when she came to Israel for my wedding with Shayna, she had been praying, probably like any Jewish grandmother whose granddaughter is, early 20s, let alone late 20s, early 30s, late 30s. She was praying with all of her heart to this God that she was at war with for Shayna to get married. And when we were getting married here in Israel, even though it was a dangerous trip for her, my grandmother, it was the beginning of a tremendous decline just from what happened to her on a trip to Israel. These are dangerous trips, but she, hazorim bedimah barina yiktzur, those who sow with tears reap with joy. The amount of tears and blessings, I don't think there's anyone at our wedding that was happier than Bubby Zush. And when she was here, she came out to the farm. And I'll never forget the look on her face when she looked at the rolling hills of Judea, at our fruit trees, at our vineyards, and most of all, really, the house of prayer, our Beit Knesset, our Beit Tfilah, touched her in such a deep way. Her eyes just filled with tears. She was so moved and so happy and so grateful and speechless at the beauty that her granddaughter is and her grandson-in-law is bringing into the world. The same eyes that saw that genocide, she is now seeing this redemptive light. Now, here's the thing. She was a giver. She was dignified. And to the last day, she would host people in her home, very Abrahamic, very aggressive with food and drink and abundance. And every time I left, even though it took her forever, she would walk all the way out, walk her guests all the way out to the car. My wife even tells me when she was a little girl, her Bubby Zush would walk them out and she would see Bubby Zush waving goodbye 2-3 blocks away. She was still waving until the car was out of view. It was that sort of, dignity and love. She understood the power of blessings. We've lost the power of blessings a little bit. We've lost the recognition that is our greatest power, especially the Jewish people. I've come to believe that a lot of the resolution of the hatred against us is because we're holding back blessing the world, blessing our enemies, blessing everyone. And she would bless, not only just bless, but bless in God's name. Like I said at our wedding, like the line for her blessings was longer than the blessing for me and Shayna. So Shayna's mother, Shayna's mother, right?
The sweetest lady in the world.
She has a lot of Bubby Zush's beautiful qualities. And she shared a conversation she had with Bubby, that Bubby wanted so much to help us establish this farm, to bring this holy mission into the world, that her last wish in this world was to dedicate something in the unique, the breathtaking, transcendent Beit Knesset, Beit Tfilah, to her memory and the memory of her family that perished in the Holocaust. That was her last wish in the world. Now, the family was conflicted because they've inherited from Bubby this idea of giving. They're not really askers. And so they didn't know if Bubby Zush would have wanted to do a campaign to memorialize her last wish in the world, to bring that into the world. She was a giver of charity, not a receiver of charity. But on the other hand, her wish was that to dedicate something beautiful in the Beit Tfilah. So Shayna's mother decided to start a campaign to fulfill Bubby's last wish and dedicate the Ner Tamid, right, the eternal flame, to Bubby Zush's memory. So we established this campaign, and it's not a request. It's not like urgent need. This is an invitation. And it's important to make that clear for Bubby's sake, that this is an invitation that anyone who wants to be a part of fulfilling Bubby's last wish in the world, that would feel uplifted and fulfilled to participate in such a holy mission, that this would be a beautiful and perfect campaign, not just because of the critical importance to the strategic and spiritual welfare of Israel and the Jewish people that is what we're doing here, but to memorialize Bubby Zush's last wish. To me, that's as holy as it gets. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to share my thoughts on this issue. This campaign started without my knowledge. I found out about this idea by accident. Ari didn't mean to do it that way. He's sort of told me in his memory, but I didn't know that it was happening. All of a sudden, I found, wow, the Ner Tamid is going to be dedicated to Bubby Zush, Holocaust survivor, but lived not through, meaning the most famous, the iconic place of all Holocaust realities, the worst of the worst, the darkest of the dark, the most efficient killing machine was Auschwitz. I mean, it was 12,000 Jews a day from sunrise to sunset. 12,000 Jews annihilated. 12,000 Jews annihilated. It's so hard for us to comprehend because when one Jew is murdered, one Ari Fold is murdered, I'm still getting over it. It's been like a little bit more than a year. 12,000 a day. It's numbers that it's like the efficiency of the German war machine was so it's hard for us to comprehend the evil of the Holocaust. And here to have the Ner Tamid. What is the Ner Tamid? The Ner Tamid is the eternal flame. The laws of the temple are that a flame must be burning in the altar of the temple always. It never goes out. And then in every synagogue around the world, right next to the Aron Kodesh, where the Torah scrolls are kept, there is a flame that's kept alit, a light that is there, that is in commemoration of that eternal flame that is on the altar, that's now in every mikdash me'at, every little temple, every little synagogue around the world. And what a representation. The Ner Tamid is the eternal flame, really, of the Jewish people. Could there be something more meaningful than the eternal flame of the Jewish people from the darkest point of the exile to the mountains of Judea in our house of prayer? Now, there are people from all over the world that have come to our house of prayer. Literally from Korea and from Hungary and Germany, all over the United States. Yesterday, we had a group from Tennessee, from South America, from Africa. Literally, the whole world has come. And now this is an opportunity to all of our listeners to actually help us fulfill a dream here, to be a part of building this beautiful house of prayer for all nations, overlooking the city of Yerushalayim and the mountains of Judea, and remembering that this is the story from the ashes of Auschwitz to the resurrection of the Jewish people back in Judea. You know, it's like a blueprint. That's how I see it. You know, you look at all of the stories. Abraham had a calling, a mission, and it began with him. And he follows his mission. He follows this calling, and he ends up in Israel, and he encounters starvation. It's like, what? He had a calling and he's following God's wish. He should be blessed. Why did he? It gets worse. He's so starving he has to go down to Egypt. And he's like, what's going on here? I'm following God's guidance in my life. Why am I encountering now Egypt? And my wife is kidnapped. I should never have followed God's guidance. Maybe I'm crazy. What is going on here? And then from that darkness, he comes back to the land of Israel, rich, filled with gold and silver and livestock. The same thing happens to Jacob. He's following God's guidance. He has visions of angels. Don't worry, God is going to be with you. He gets stuck in the exile, and his father-in-law wants to kill him. His brother wants to kill him. What's going on? Finally, he comes back, and from him comes the 12 tribes of Israel. And then, of course, the Jewish people, we go down into Egypt. Why do we got to go down into Egypt? We're enslaved when Pharaoh. Then once again, the biblical pattern of reality. The Jewish people are sent out into exile. A new Pharaoh named Hitler enslaves us, murders us. And then from that, we return to build this empire called the State of Israel with the strongest economy in the world, the strongest military in the world. I don't understand how all that happened. I feel like that happened to me in my personal life here at this farm. I'm like following God's guidance, trying to do my best to establish the deepest settlement in Judea and build a monument that would bring people from different faiths and different backgrounds together through the Psalms of King David and the Tanakh itself in our love for the land of Israel. And man, we came into financial struggles. We've been sued by the Supreme Court. I was going to end up being homeless and penniless with 6 kids. It was so scary. But now I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm the richest man in the world. And here we are now building a Beit Tefillah that we have the opportunity of inviting everyone from around the world to contribute $10, $25, and they can actually have a place in Israel that they've helped build the eternal flame. It's like to light it up, to be a part of that. That is such a beautiful campaign.
Now I have to tell you something, Jeremy. You were a very good friend to me. Yeah, I mean, you've been a great friend to me for many, many years. But, I made a mistake. It was not made from a bad place for sure. It was made from a good place, from a place of zeal, from being overwhelmed with a certain truth. And sometimes when you see colors and swirls, you just aren't thinking on every front. And, you and me, all of us, and particularly you and your family have been very foundationally critical in building this Beit Knesset, this Beit Tefillah at the top of our mountain here, at the highest place, the highest altitude. Why do we decide that place? Because it's our heritage. That if we're praying to the El Elyon, the God of the Most High, it should be at the highest place on the entire property. And that's where it is. And it was with tremendous self-sacrifice and Mesirut Nefesh that your family has been paying every single week for 2 years? Right, to have this place built. And then I said, Bubby Zush, we're going to do the Ner Tamid. And you could have said, what? There's practical, real things that we need to do here at this farm. And to dedicate the Ner Tamid, you could have said, we could actually generate a decent amount of income that we need to build this place, to sustain this place through the Ner Tamid. And you love Bubby Zush, but you could have said, why didn't you discuss this further?
We should have had the highest bidder.
Yeah, the highest bidder. And I think really the reason that I didn't, I was so swept away with it, and it was Bubby's last wish in the world. I think in my heart, I was like, this is what is going to be done. This is what we're going to do. And so I set up this campaign, and it says, in the campaign, what's the goal? And I just put no goal, because the truth is that I just said to myself, I'll do whatever I have to do to make sure that this is dedicated to Bubby Zush. And it shouldn't be about, if we hit this goal, then that will. No, I just couldn't live with such a thing.
Yeah. Also, I think that everyone knows us at this point. We don't really run campaigns. That's not our thing. We have run,
but we're not. It's
in
not our
years.
Yeah.
People have been listening to the Land of Israel Network for years. We've never ran a campaign before. That's just not what we're doing. But I really feel like this is a truth. This is such a beautiful opportunity to really allow people to help us build the house of prayer, to be a part of it, to invest in it, to sow in it, to let them feel like they have a place. So many of the groups that come here, they leave us a little bit of money, each person $10, it's like 100 euros, and allows us to slowly continue to build it. It's one of the highlights of their trip, that they know that they've actually built this house of prayer. If there's anywhere
where people really want to be a part of it, it's that.
And so now we're able to open it up now to the public for all of those.
Yeah, and it's not only to build it, it's to fulfill the last wish of an Auschwitz survivor. That's just an honor and a privilege and an opportunity that doesn't come by all the time. So I think that's what I did. So I just want to thank you, because at the beginning, I'm almost sure that I wouldn't have responded with the same way you did. And I think it was for a bracha that you did respond that way.
Well, here's the way that I see this whole Ner Tamid, this whole life on the farm, the existence of the Jewish people at large. We are Hashem's witnesses in the world. That's what Yeshayahu calls us. Hashem calls us his witnesses through the prophet Isaiah. That's probably the more correct language to use. In my project for Akiva, for the last 3 years, maybe 2.5 years, we are now finishing all of the prophets of Israel, from Joshua all the way through the Kings, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Hosea, Amos, all of them. The boy is going to have read and learned all of the prophets of Israel before he's 13. It's pretty unbelievable.
Most learned Jews have not done that, at least in the exile, because it's just not part of the curriculum.
Yep, and so that's
this past Shabbat at your house, we had a question about King Chizkiyahu, and he's like, he was with Amos in this part of the. I mean, he just knew everything. Yeah, I was so moved and shocked by that you can't put a price tag on that. And by the way, if you did, American tuition wouldn't come close to being able to fulfill. And what does it cost in Israel? That's one of the greatest arguments for Aliyah. One of the greatest arguments is Torah educational tuition.
So Isaiah says that Hashem says that we are God's witnesses. We are the testimony. Our existence in the land of Israel, Jews in Judea, we are the testimony for every single person around the world that's struggling, that's suffering, to never ever, ever give up hope. That whatever struggles Jacob went through, whatever struggles Israel has gone through, there's a process. It's not always easy. It's sometimes even painful, but at the end, it's all for the good. At the end, the good will rise up. We are the testimony that after all of the atrocities and horrific exile that we have been through, we are back in the land of Judea, and the Ner Tamid is lighting up from the ashes of Auschwitz to the mountains of Judea. It is so beautiful. So I love this campaign, even though I didn't really have a hand in it.
No, I wouldn't say you didn't have a hand in it. You had a very big hand in it. And not only that, your whole family has a big hand in it too, because I could understand them being involved in it, and they were blessing it. They were supporting it. Anyways, about the Tanakh, about reading, there's people I know it's a phenomenon in America that some people send their children to a Jewish day school up until the 5th grade, and then junior high, they're like, okay, they got the Jewish foundation, junior high, and they go off to a public school, and that's, my class went from, I think, 39 kids to 7 kids. That was a very difficult thing for me. I begged my parents to let me go with all my friends. But a lot of those friends, they say, okay, we got our Jewish foundation. We read through the different parshiot in the Torah, and that's it. They don't reread other books. So why reread that? But every time that the year goes by and we reconnect, the Torah is an Eitz Chaim. It's a tree of life. It's a living thing. And we're living things. And as we're going through life and living the Torah and going through it again, it speaks to us in entirely new ways. And this Torah portion, I got to say, it very much connected with me on that level. And one pasuk really resonated with me. And this is Rav Biederman from Torah Wellspring. It's a very powerful idea that he shares. But it says, when Yaakov was approaching Esav, and Esav had 400 armed men, okay, he says, Vayar Yaakov me'od. Yaakov was very afraid. Vayitzar lo, and it distressed him. So what does Rav Biederman say? What distressed him? What was it that distressed him? His fear, right? It says already he was afraid. Why does it say, and then it distressed him? It was his fear that distressed him. Because is he an ish emunah? Does he have faith? Has he internalized that faith from his head to his heart and converted it to bitachon and trust? If so, why was he so afraid? And so he was distressed by the fact that he was afraid. And that really spoke to me. I get that, because very often it's my reactions. It's when I feel anger that I'm like, my sadness is at the anger that I feel, even more than the anger in and of itself. Because, Yaakov considered it, he says, Katonti mikol chasadim, I've been diminished by all the kindness that you've done to me, he says to God. Now, when you read that, when you hear, I've been diminished by that, what is that? There's so many different ways to read that, some of which are opposites of each other.
That was the pasuk that Tehillah first said when Akiva was born, because he was born on this week's Torah portion 13 years ago.
I was just about to be like, wow, that's a coincidence.
And so it was his Brit Milah, and she said that I'm katonti. She had experienced a real dangerous thing after he was born, and I was alone taking it. So like my parents got involved, her parents got involved, and we had 2 camps. And she's like, look at this, here I am, and I'm so blessed that I have 2 camps just like Jacob. And we have 2 children in the land of Israel. Katonti mikol chasadim. I feel so overwhelmed of the goodness that God has bestowed upon me. I just feel so small. I feel unworthy. I'm undeserving. I'm so blessed. That's like lo magiali. I'm just so small. I'm so humbled by the whole thing. And so I think that katonti there, he really, through a sense of appreciation, a certain humility is born.
So that's one way. Like, I'm just humbled. I'm humbled by all of the kindness that you've given me. Another way to read it is katonti. I've become smaller, meaning that he looked around at his physical, material wealth, the blessings of his family, of all of what he has been given by God. He went there with nothing, penniless, nothing, and now he has all of this wealth and family and blessings. He feels like he's diminished, that it's like a demerit for him, that he's used up whatever merits he's had in this. Right, in this, the blessings that he's gotten. So now he's like, I'm out of merits.
I'm out of merits. I'm small now.
I'm out of merits. And meanwhile, my brother Esav was able to be in in Israel with his parents, honoring his father and mother, and getting all of those merits, and his merits just don't stack up to Esav's merits. And so he saw it as demerits. But you see, that's the difference between Yaakov and Avram. Yaakov saw things as merits and demerits, perhaps, if you read it this way. And when you mess up, you lose divine protection. And that's something I've been trying to shake for many years. I still haven't shaken it, is I have this sort of weird Excel sheet in my head about things that I've done that were one of the big things that I feel like I did that I got a lot of merits from, ironically, is Tuesday Night Live in Jerusalem. I was so terrified by that whole thing. I put myself out on the line, in my experience, in such an extreme, paralyzing way, that for years afterwards, I felt like I was dipping into that and using up those credits in my account, which I've used up, by the way, according to my own weird Excel sheet in my head a long time ago. But I understand this Yaakov thing about diminished, that he feels. But Avraham, so when he was promised a son, it says he believed, right? He believed that Hashem would give him a son, and it was nechshav lo tzedakah, right? Do you remember that?
Sure.
So do you mind if how did you I used to read that differently than when, I forget which of our sages has shared it with me.
How do you read it?
So I used to read it, nechshav lo tzedakah, that Hashem considered it like tzedakah, that it was a tzedek, that it was a holy thing for Avram to believe him. But Rav Biederman shares that this belief, it was tzedakah. Avraham perceived this promise to him as tzedakah. It wasn't a merit. It wasn't based on the merits that he's built up. It was just tzedakah. All of the blessings. Avram was the wealthiest man in the world. And all of the blessings that he was given, respect, honor, wealth, he just considered it tzedakah. It wasn't in return for things he's done for Hashem. It wasn't in return for all of his commandments of circumcision and welcoming guests into your home and charity. And that wasn't because of that. It was just tzedakah. God was just giving him tzedakah. And that belief that everything we get that's good isn't about merits and demerits, but it's just tzedakah for Hashem, it really frees us up in a serious way. It will improve our avodat Hashem, our service of God, because no longer is it about trying to build up merits that Hashem will then protect us and do things for us. The self-interest isn't there, right? And it's just tzedakah. But Yaakov, on the other hand, was afraid that he used up his merits. He had a different perception according to this reading and understanding. And go ahead. But I'll tell you, I get why Yitzchak was so afraid and why he was so afraid of his fear. What is
Yitzchak or Yaakov?
I'm sorry, Yaakov. Why was he so afraid of the fear? Listen, King David, right? He says, "V'ani tfilati uchal v'hosafti al kol tilatecha," meaning, I always trust in you, and that is worth more than all of your praises. Meaning, like, when you get down to the heart of things, it is the internalization of faith to our very heart, our soul, our limbs, that trust is the greatest service of Hashem, because it's an internalization of the knowledge that Hashem is running the world and that everything is tzedakah, because fear can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the story is told, it's like you put planks in the middle of a field, right? And you have people walk over those planks in the middle of the field. They'll stay right there on the planks. But if you put it over a large ravine, right, where there's a serious fall, many of them will fall from those very same planks that they were able to walk over when it was just planks lying down on a field. Why? Because the fear of falling is what brings that to happen. It brings it into the world.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right, and this is something I have a lot of personal examples, but I don't know that they're necessarily mine to share, but I've seen this through my life, that when I have a fear and I nurture it, we've spoken about this before, and you don't neutralize it in a whole series of ways that we could talk about on another show that we've talked about before, that I try to neutralize fears and internalize faith. If you nurture that fear, you inevitably attract it and bring it into existence in a practical, real way, not an abstract faith sort of secret documentary sort of way, but in a real way. Even Eov, he says, that which I was afraid of came to me. Meaning, when you're afraid of something, you bring it into the world. You attract that very fear that you have to yourself. And that's why I'll tell you, I think that a lot of the Holocaust survivors that I've seen, and there's a disproportionate amount of Holocaust survivors that went on to become multi-millionaires. And I think a big part of that reason is because they had been in the depth of darkness. they have been beyond without food. So they're not afraid when they start up a business. They're not afraid of it busting, going broke, going flat, because they've been there before. They can do that. They're not in a gas chamber.
Yeah, no,
they're not in the barracks of Auschwitz.
There's like rock bottom, and then there's what they've been at, where it's like, okay, it can't. What is there to fear at this point? I've looked fear, death right in the eye, and there is nothing to fear at this point.
Right, and that's why, just to bring it back to Bubby Zush, okay, she had endured so much, and there were things that she was praying for. But I really think she would not have been able to walk around exuding this joy and happiness and love and compassion and selflessness if she went through life with these fears.
Even more than fears, her desire her last wish was to help us out here in Judea, to go from Auschwitz, to build up a fortification in the deepest settlement in Judea, to build a house of prayer that would be a sanctification of all peoples, of God's name among all peoples, to bring brotherhood and love between she saw that we have groups coming from all over the world, from different backgrounds, and this place is like brought people, instead of hating different nations, loving nations in Israel. And so, it says that tzaddikim in their death are more powerful than in their lifetime. And so she wasn't able to help us that much in her lifetime. She was in her 90s. How would she go lift the rocks up? And all of a sudden, this campaign in her passing, it's already been such a blessing. People from all over are joining her mission.
We haven't even really announced it.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And so it just shows that, there's influence that people can have well beyond their own lifetime as they physically live on this earth, that her dreams are now coming to pass as she's passed on from this world. And that's really beautiful to see her desires being fulfilled, from the visions of the horrors to the just majestic, beautiful life of the land of Israel. It's just awesome.
And so I thought a good thing to do right now would be to air the interview that I merited having with Bubby Zush when we were last together, or the time before we were last together. And I sat down and she told me her story, and it was so moving and so powerful. And I thought to air that interview. Now listen, to those out there that want to be a part of this, that it would bring you joy to be a part of this. Under this show, we'll have the link to the campaign. And you can click on that link and be a part of it, whether it's 25, 100, or 1,000. This, to me, is a tremendous opportunity. And Jeremy, yes.
Yeah, this is also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The House of Prayer is almost done. This is your opportunity to actually have a place that you have actually given towards to allow it to be built. It's almost done. We just now finished putting on the ceiling to the entryway. This is the one option, or the one opportunity to actually kindle the eternal light, the Ner Tamid, in this house of prayer. So it's just a beautiful once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And, this is what's the door is open now for people from around that know Ari and I, that know Bubby Zush, that know this story of the Jewish people, that would love to help us accomplish this goal in Judea.
And so before I introduce Bubby Zush, I just want to wish you, Jeremy, a mazel tov on the bar mitzvah of Akiva. You should have tremendous amounts of nachas and pride. He should be a source of pride, not only for you, but all of the Jewish people. And thank you. Thank you so much. And Bubby Zush, this is the interview of Bubby Zush. Enjoy. Shalom, everybody. So it is a tremendous privilege to be interviewing today a very special woman who I've come to know over the past 2 weeks. Her name is Sophie Lubka. Otherwise known by her grandchildren as Bubby Zush. She is 94 years old and tremendous strength, very sharp mentally, sweet and loving emotionally, and physically very strong. And a very remarkable human being. And I'm very grateful, Bubby Zush, that you agreed to sit down and let me interview you. This means really a lot to me. And I think that over time, the people that listen to will be very grateful that you shared your story. So maybe if we could start with your story. Where would you say your story best begins?
I was born in Poland, and I lived with my family in Pabianice, Poland, which is 15 kilometers from Lodz. And after having a very nice upbringing, my parents were loving and very close to us children and working people, and us kids in those days had to help, but it was like part of nature. Anyway, everything was nice and good till the war broke out in 1939 when the Germans came. We lived not far away from the border, so we were the first to feel their presence in Pabianice. Right away, they made us go to a ghetto. We lived in the new part of the city, and they built a place for the Jews in the old part of city. And living space was very limited. 3 families, 4 families lived in one apartment.
Bubby, I want to ask you, you said that in 1939,
Yes,
all of this happened. Did it feel like it happened very quickly
yes.
between the Germans coming and you being in the ghetto? How much time was that?
Maybe they came in September, 1st of September 1939, and in the ghetto maybe were the beginning of 1940, in the Pabianic ghetto. Then in 1942, they made Pabianice Judenrein. They sent us all to Lodz ghetto.
For those of you out there who don't know, the word Judenrein means no Jews.
No Jews. And going to Lodz ghetto, they separated right away men from women. And my father was one, and the 2 brothers of mine were sent from Lodz to Helmno. And my mother, myself, and my 2 sisters, we stayed in the Lodz ghetto. We didn't know anything about them till I found out after the war what happened to them. In the Lodz ghetto, we all had to work very hard because we had to buy food. Our food was rationed, and even though we needed money to buy the food, earn the coupons, and I worked in a straw resort. One of my sisters, Miriam, worked in a place across the street from where I worked. She was I forgot the name. Can you hold a minute?
Sure, of course.
Can you connect? She was braiding the straw, and out of that braiding straw, I used to make shoes, big boots for the German soldiers that went to Russia, on the Russian front, for them not to be cold, for them to wear over their boots. And I was the oldest daughter. My 2 younger sisters, I felt obligated that I have to provide for the house. And myself and a couple friends of mine in that group that we did accord work. We made from 10 to 15 boots a day. That was a lot of work, working wintertime in a cold place, no heat, no fires around straw. Anyway, thank God at that point we did not have to sell our rations to be able to buy rations, in which in a lot of people that were not able to work, that happened. They were selling their rations in order to buy rations. My mother worked in a resort, in a factory that made slippers. So did my other sister. And
I remember actually, I think one of your grandchildren was telling me a story about you working so hard that you had a cut in your hand.
no, this happened in Dresden when I worked in the kitchen.
Okay, so we're not at that part yet.
No.
Okay, so
That's-
so we're in the ghetto right now. We're talking.
Yeah.
You're in the ghetto
Yes.
in Lodz.
Yes, and somehow we made it the hard way from day to day, starving, hungry, swollen. Matter of fact, to the point that whenever some Pabianic people, friend of mine, try to come and visit me, I used to tell my mother to tell them that I'm not home, because in the last minute, our president of the ghetto from Pabianic told us not to take a lot of clothes. The Germans would take it away anyway. So we came almost with no clothes, no shoes to the ghetto, and it was embarrassing for me that I had to wear wooden shoes, that my friends should see me like that, swollen, being swollen, no boots, no. I wasn't the same person in the ghetto the way I was back in home. Anyway, that lasted till 1944. 1944, in August 8th, they made Judenrein, they emptied the ghetto. They sent every day, every day more transports to Auschwitz. We didn't know, of course, that we're going to Auschwitz. We were told that we're going to work, that they're taking us to work. So we all signed up, and in the meantime, my sister after me, Luba, she was sent out of the ghetto before us. Unfortunate. So to Auschwitz, it was just my mother, me, and my sister Miriam, that we went together to Auschwitz. And
Where was Luba sent to?
We don't know. We had no contact. They sent her out of the ghetto, and that was it.
And you never saw her again?
Never till now. Never heard of her. Anyway, in Stutthof, after the horrible trip to Auschwitz in the cattle cars, once in the lines for Dr. Mengele to examine, to send us to the right, to right or left, my mother was torn away from us, and unfortunate, we could not help getting her back. I lost my mother in Auschwitz the same day. So it was just me and my sister Miriam that tried to survive.
Did you even get to say goodbye to her?
Nothing. She saw us being beaten. We didn't want to let go of her, so we were beaten. And she says in Yiddish, "Go, my children, I'll see you later." Never saw again. So in Auschwitz, we went through the procedure of having our heads shaved. They shaved us, and they let us go to showers and took our clothes, whatever our possessions, and gave us. Short people were given long dresses. Tall people were getting short dresses. We looked like circus people. Anyway, we didn't look like people at all at that point. Anyway, we were sent to barracks, and life was terrible.
What were the barracks like?
We slept on cots, and in the middle of the barrack was like a walk-through that we had Hungarian people watching us. They spoke German, and they felt a little more privileged than the Polish Jews. And in the morning they prayed to God, but after their prayers they got whips and beat us. The more they beat us, the more popular they were getting. And
You're saying the Nazis got more popular the more they beat?
the Hungarian people,
Oh,
the
the
Hungarian girls,
Hungarian
our
girls.
own girls.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, it was horrible. Dirt, lice, latrines outside. I don't have to describe Auschwitz. I'm sure at that point, in that late years of our time now, people know the background of our being in Auschwitz. Anyway, after a few weeks, we were chosen to go they send us to another camp up north in Poland, 3 miles from the Baltic Sea. They sent us to Stutthof, which was another Auschwitz. But after a while, by sheer luck, the SS woman came to the barracks and chose me to help to work for her. And at the same time, she agreed that my sister should come with me. So at that point, we had enough. We ate her soups. And our soups I was bringing out to the people in the barracks behind that I left my friends. And I got a lot of blessing at that point. Anyway, to make...
So you were eating a little bit better than
we
others
ate a
were.
little bit better, yes. And in Stutthof, it so happened that a German leader of Lodz Ghetto, Joseph Bibov, kept a group of Lodz engineers, and he was building himself a Luftzeug factory in Dresden, and he kept those engineers till the factory was ready. Once it was ready, one of the labor department people came to the SS woman in our barracks, asking for three women, because three women died in the engineer group, and he needed substitute. So my sister says, Sophie, let's put our names on the list. But I said, Miriam, here we have bread. What we know, maybe we won't be so privileged. She says, but maybe we found some news about our family. Maybe we come across people that know something about them. So I listened, and we went from Stutthof to Dresden. 3 days later, we heard that the Russians were coming closer to Stutthof, and the Germans told the people that they're taking them on a trip to Sweden, that they resettling them to Sweden. In the meantime, they drowned them in the Baltic Sea.
Explain that. The Germans said they were going to take them to Sweden, so they put them onto ships.
Yes.
And then they took those ships out to the middle of the sea?
They drowned the people in the Baltic Sea.
Oh, my goodness.
And we were not engineers, so we did not professional work, but luckily we were assigned to work in the kitchen. That's where I got that my thumb infected. And at night, one of the lodge doctors and a few people risked their lives to save me because I had already green marks on my arm.
Oh, no. So your thumb was infected?
Yes.
And what would happen if your thumb was infected? I imagine they don't send you to a doctor.
That's right, German. And doctor, they probably would put me in the oven. Anyway, they risked their life. I still have a mark, you can see.
I see.
Yeah, and they saved my life. And eventually, when the Allies bombed Germany, the first bombing was Dresden. One of the biggest bombing on Germany was Dresden. Our factory was burning, and they kept us in the factory to the last minute. In the last minute, they decided to save us and brought us out to a sports field. And then...
So they took you to a sports field, and that's how you survived?
Yes. But then they had nothing to do for me in that place. They only kept the professional engineers, and people like me and others like me, they sent to a camp near Dresden, and from there on, after a few days, they sent us on a march to Dachau. And it was horrible. We slept in the grass and wherever.
The march from Dresden to
yes,
Dachau.
Yes, we slept in the fields. We slept wherever we were. No hotels. No, nothing. And one morning,
were you able to eat and drink?
We had no food. We had nothing. We were starving. It was horrible. They didn't give us food in the march. On March, in the marching. Anyway, one morning my sister woke up and she picked a little grass to wet her lips with the dew of the grass. And she got beaten by assessment so that she couldn't get up. And I said, to see my sister like that, I said, we're going to live together or we're going to die together. And I made up my mind that we're going to escape from the marching. This was already April 1944. And we had in our group an elderly girl that was more experienced than us. She was a ex-partisan from Vilna, and we looked up to her to guide us, and she agreed with us to run. So in the marching, we watched for a place, for the right place and the right time to go.
But it was very risky.
We risked our life, but it didn't matter. To see my sister like that, not be able to get up, it was that made up our minds. Life was not worth living. So finally, my friend said that it's time to. We walked by woods, and she said, "Let's run and hide in the woods." How we had strength to run from the road across to the woods, I'll never know. But we ran. We ran so deep in the woods that we saw skeletons of animals. Anyway, luckily we didn't have striped clothes. We had regular clothes with painted concentration camp on it, KL, and stripes on the side. So we turned it inside out, and we went the opposite way. The marching group went one way, and we went the other way. And we finally came to a village and knocked on the lady's door. And she must have been so scared of us. We must have looked like scarecrows. Swollen, hungry, not human. Anyway, she said we said we're looking for work, we Polish girls. She said she doesn't have work for us, but in the next village is a Polish girl. Maybe she'll help us. Good enough. We marched and we found a girl.
Did this woman, did she give you at least something to drink?
Nothing. She was afraid to open the door. She talked to us through a closed door, through a window in the door, through a little window.
She was afraid to even open the door.
Of course. We didn't look human. If that would be mean, if I would see somebody like that, I would be scared too. Anyway, we found a Polish girl, and she said that her boss does not need helpers, but his brother is nearby, and they took his son to the army, and he has a daughter that is not a big worker. She was a little nutty. Anyway, she brought us to that farmer, and he accepted to keep us. And at that night, there was a big tureen of soup at the table and a home-baked loaf of bread. And he said, sit down and eat. We looked at each other, not believing that we lived the day that we can eat bread. It was like the best cake in the world at that point. After we ate, he told us to go to the barn. We slept in the barn. And in the morning, we rested and were not hungry at that point. We had to go to the fields. We worked in the fields.
That's why he was keeping you there, so you would work.
And
do you think that there was something in his heart that he wanted to save you or protect you?
No, I don't think so. It's just a need of hands, because he had a big farm. The daughter did not work in the fields. He needed people to work in the fields. And he was desperate. It was springtime. So
It's time to harvest.
No, to plant things. It was early spring.
Okay, so this was the planting.
Yes.
Okay.
So we did whatever. We cleaned the field and seeded the field, whatever he asked us to do. But we used to come home early in the day because we used to go to work 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. So by 12, 1, we were back in his place. And then our job was to feed the animals. So we shared the food with the animals. We had boiled potatoes. We discovered where he kept the meats, whatever, the dry meats, and we helped ourselves. We had a ball. Anyway, after we worked at the farm for 2 weeks, the same Polish girl came running, excited. She said, you don't have to work anymore. The American soldiers are on the road. And we ran like crazy to see the American soldiers.
So you had 2 weeks working for this farmer.
Yes.
You were working in the fields, and in exchange he gave you some food. You also found his secret stash of dried meats.
Yeah.
And things were good for you. And then 2 weeks later,
we looked a little bit more normal.
right.
Anyway.
2 weeks later, you hear that the American soldiers are there on the road.
And I noticed a soldier with Jewish stars on his epaulets, and I waved him down. And he came out to say that he cannot talk to us now, that he'll come back later because he cannot leave the column. So he did come back later. It turned out to be that he was American chaplain, and from that time on, he took care of us like a father.
Well, what language did you speak to him in?
Whatever language we could, German, Yiddish.
Okay.
We didn't know a word of English at that point, but he understood us. He understood Yiddish.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Okay.
We were able to communicate with him.
So he was like a father to you.
Absolutely. He said he'll come back for us, and he did. The same night, the same day, he took us to his place in his hotel, found us accommodation, so brought us clothes, brought us food. He really extended himself to the utmost for us. Wherever he went, we went. And it came a time, after a while, that he asked us where we want to go, what we want to do with ourselves in the future. And I told him we want to go home. Maybe somebody survived from the family. But, of course, he checked for us, wrote letters to the Polish government, to the place where we lived, and unfortunate, nobody survived. Nobody. So the next question, where should we go? We chose to go, our first place to go, of course, was Israel. And he set us up with the Haganah, Briha, whatever organizations that took care of survivors, providing trips to Israel for us. And from the place, from where I was, he sent us to Pilsen, because there was a camp that people from all over that part of Germany was meeting. And from there on, little by little, we made steps to go south to Italy, and from Italy to Israel. And in the meantime, being that this was a camp that people came from all over, more people came from Prague, and in a group, people from Prague was few people from Lodz, and they heard that there's Lodz, the people, some girls from Lodz, they came to talk to us, so they found us in our barrack, and the first question was, on everybody's mouth, did you come across this name, that person? Did we see people that were related to them? Unfortunately, being that they came from the same place as we did, they were in the same place, but Stuttgart was as big place as Auschwitz, and we did not know them, unfortunately. But anyway, being that they were from Lodz, that group, we hooked up with them. They were in between these people, I met my future husband. My sister met her future husband.
How did that happen?
And that same guy that came in the morning to ask me for his family, he asked me to go to they had dances at night. And at first his name didn't sound Jewish to me, but his friend assured me that he is Jew. So I agreed to go to the dance. But there was another guy. I waited at the station. My sister went back to bring some more of our stuff that the chaplain got for us. And she's supposed to come on a train back to Pilsen. And I waited for her. And somebody sat next to me on the same bench, a guy that I met previously from Lodge 2. And he asked, "What am I doing here?" I said, "I'm waiting for my sister." And he asked me for a date too. I said, "I already have a date." Then he says, is your sister as pretty as you?" I said, "She's prettier." So, and he waited. He went, he didn't let me go to the station to pick her up. He went, and he said to my sister when she stepped down from the train, "Are you Manusha Rosenzweig?" She says, "Yeah." "And who are you?" She never saw him in her life. Anyway, he never let go, and they became a couple. And it came time to go to Israel, and I was sitting with my sister already on the bus, and my future husband came over and he said that God does not ask people like us to go to Israel. Israel was at war, and we just came out of a war. He said, God does not let people to go from one war to another. And again, I was idealist. I didn't want to give up my idea of going to Israel. But my sister said, maybe he is right. And again, I listened to my sister. But...
And your husband.
Yes. But in order to come to America, we had to move back to Germany and live in the German zone to be able to go to America.
Wait, and you could have gone to Israel or to America, but in order to go to America, you needed to go live in Germany?
Yes, back to Germany.
Was that a scary idea for you?
And the war was over, no.
The war was over, but the people are still there.
Yes, but they were already American people there too. We had protection, we were free. We lived in camps, but we were free. Anyway, we wind up in Vierenwald, and 6 months later, four couples of us, got married together. And Rav Herzog was visiting the area, Munich area, in that time, and he heard of the four couples getting married, four couples of survivors. He was excited and wanted to be a guest, and he came from his whatever meetings, whatever, he cut everything and came to be with us. He came, of course, late. He just managed to marry the youngest couple, which was my sister Miriam and my brother-in-law, Morris Zweibaum.
So Miriam and Morris were married by Rav Herzog.
And our Drosha Geschenk, wedding presents, supposed to be the first certificates to Israel. We never got them. Forgive me, Rabbi, wherever you are.
So he promised presents and he wasn't able. Maybe they got lost in the mail.
Maybe. Anyway, in order to get to America, we had to wait for our quotas. We waited 4 years. 4 years to get to America. Of course, we had enough camps. So after a while, we moved to Stuttgart, and my daughter was born in Stuttgart. And in 1949, our time came to America. And thank God we came. We had in Hartford, Connecticut, My husband's older brother came before us. We followed him. My sister followed me, and we,
Is that how it usually worked out? You ended up moving to wherever you had mishpacha,
yes. in
wherever
the
you had
States,
family.
of course. In the States, we were like all other citizens. Of course, we had to make our citizenship. And in 1954, we all became citizens. But, like I say, we had to work hard. American people were not too
Helpful.
helpful, not at all.
Even American Jews?
American Jews cried to us that they had it rough too, that they had to eat chicken and they couldn't buy silk stockings. And I told them, my heart cries for you. Anyway.
Do you think they were really aware? Did they know what you had been through?
I hope so. I hope so.
Because there's a lot of controversy about whether American Jews knew it was happening.
Were not sympathetic. They were not. They opened their arms to Russian Jews. Russian Jews came. The apartment were waiting for them, places of where they would be living. They had furnished them for them. For us, we had no place where to live. When I came, my sister-in-law was able to arrange for me a place, one room with kitchen privileges, and an elderly Jewish lady, one room for 3 people. And I cooked too much, I cleaned too much, I washed too much, everything was too much. So eventually, my husband had a hard time getting a job, no language. He signed up once to go to a factory, and the people in the factory asked him to sign the slip that he didn't know even what he's signing. And it was to join a union, and the boss did not like unions, so the following day he was out of a job again. Very hard.
And he didn't even know that he was signing a union.
No, we didn't have, with the time, my husband went to school at night, but I had to stay with the children. I picked up the language from the children, from papers, books, whatever, but I never went to school in America. I never had a chance because I always worked too. And here I am.
Wow. So he started a business eventually.
Yeah, eventually, with the help of a fellow Gentile, helped him to learn how to dry clean silk. And at that time, silk was popular, and he made a go of it. We borrowed money, but shortly the restitution money came too, and that was a big help. He bought a business and established himself, and thank God I was able to buy a house, because I lived with a lady that let us have an apartment, but on the porch my kids could not play because her daughter's boyfriends occupied the porch. In the back she had a garden, and the kids couldn't play in the back either. So we desperately needed a place where to live, and the restitution money from Germany was a big help for us to be able to give it a down payment on the house. And I raised a family of 3 children, thank God, with education, with a nice background, and just unfortunate. My husband died young, and I kept going because I had no choice, and here I am, 36 years a widow.
36 years a widow. But on the other hand, you did get to see your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren.
Thank God. Baruch Hashem.
And you have great-grandchildren both, you have children and grandchildren both in Israel and in America.
Yes.
And looking back, I'm not going to keep you for too much longer, don't worry. But looking back, do you feel like there was any, have you held on to anything that along your journey that has given you strength?
The responsibility, once you had a family, it's the responsibility of keeping going, to give them backgrounds, to see that they grow up for decent human beings with education, Jewish education, American education. We had a lot of obligations to our children.
Well, you should know that you had obligations, but you still do. We need you around.
Oh, thank you.
We still need you around. So stay strong
I
and
hope
stay
God
healthy.
will give me strength.
Amen. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and please God, we should have many more years with you.
Let's hope to God. It's all in God's hands.
Amen.
Hey folks, Yishai Fleischer here, and you might know that I have a show here on the Land of Israel Network, something I'm really proud of, and I want you to join in. This week we're going to talk about the fight between Jacob and Israel. It's a little bit surprising, not Jacob and Esav, but Jacob and Israel, and we're going to be connected.